Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Yemen's health ministry says at least 53 people were killed and dozens of others wounded over the weekend after the United States launched nearly 4 dozen airstrikes against the Houthis. More than 30 civilians are reportedly among the dead, including 4 children and a woman killed when U.S. bombs struck 2 houses in Yemen's northern Sada province. The Trump administration said it began the attacks after the Houthis resumed drone and missile attacks on ships in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden, saying they're acting in solidarity with Palestinians under Israeli siege in Gaza. A Houthi spokesman Sunday promised to continue the strikes.
With the help of God Almighty, the Yemeni armed forces will continue to impose a naval blockade on the Israeli enemy and ban its ships in the declared zone of operations until aid and basic needs are delivered to the Gaza Strip.
On social media, President Trump vowed to use, quote, overwhelming lethal force like nothing you've have seen before, unquote, against Yemen. A Trump administration official told reporters the attacks on Yemen might continue for weeks. The bombings come even though Congress has not declared war on Yemen. President Trump's invoked an 18th century law to order the deportation of Venezuelan nationals from the United States. On Saturday, the Trump administration flew more than 260 immigrants to El Salvador, including over 130 people accused but not convicted of having ties to the gang Tren de Aragua, which Trump has labeled a terrorist organization. The flights came despite a temporary restraining order from U.S. District Judge James Boasberg, who ordered any deportation flights that were currently in the air to turn around. The Washington Post reports 3 flights bound for El Salvador arrived after the judge's order. Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele, a Trump ally, shared video on social media showing deportees arriving at a notorious supermax prison where guards have been accused of gross human rights abuses. President Bukele tweeted, "Oopsie, too late," adding the face with tears of joy emoji. The comment was then retweeted by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and White House Communications Director Stephen Chung. Trump's order is based on the rarely invoked Alien Enemies Act of 1798, which was last used to justify the arrest and internment of 30,000 Japanese, German, and Italian nationals during World War II. We'll have more on this case later in the broadcast with the ACLU's Lee Gallant, who says President Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act is flat-out lawless. The federal judge Boasberg will hold a hearing on why the Trump administration ignored his order today. Meanwhile, the New York Times reports the Trump administration could target citizens from up to 43 countries with new travel restrictions that would be broader than those imposed during Trump's first term. A draft list includes 11 countries whose citizens would be flatly barred from U.S. entry: Afghanistan, Bhutan, Cuba, Iran, Libya, North Korea, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Venezuela, and Yemen. U.S. immigration agents have arrested another Palestinian student who participated in Gaza solidarity protests at Columbia University. Laka Cordia, who is from the occupied West Bank, had been on a lapsed student visa. Separately, an Indian national left the U.S. after her enrollment and student visa was unlawfully revoked. Ranjani Srinivasan was expected to graduate this year with a doctoral degree from Columbia's Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. Her lawyer said she was arrested the night students took over what's now known as Hens Hall, though she did not actually participate in that protest. Meanwhile, video has emerged showing the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil last Saturday by plainclothes officers who did not identify themselves. The video was filmed by his 8-month pregnant wife, Noor Abdullah, whose voice you're hearing in this clip.
Can you please specify what agency is taking him, please? Excuse me. They're not talking to me. I don't know. Excuse me. The lawyer would like to speak to somebody. Oh my God, they're literally running away from me.
His wife is an American citizen. Mahmoud Khalil had a green card. On Friday, Khalil's legal team filed a motion seeking his release on bail. He's being held at an ICE immigration facility in Louisiana. More large-scale protests took place across the country over the weekend demanding ICE release him and defending the right to free speech. Here in New York, Grant Minor, the president of the Student Workers of Columbia, UAW, addressed crowds just days after Minor was fired by Columbia for taking part in anti-war campus protests.
I was expelled and fired for participating in protests. This is a campaign of fear. The purpose of this is to cause fear and to quash the movement to free Palestine on our campuses and across the nation. I'm here to tell you that labor, that students, that everybody here is going to fight back.
The far-right pro-Israeli government group Betar has taken credit for Mahmoud Khalil's arrests and boasts it has a deportation list containing thousands of names that it sent to the Trump administration. Meanwhile, Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania suspended one student as it issued sanctions earlier this month for 15 pro-Palestinian student protesters. Swarthmore announced the penalties days after Trump threatened to rescind federal funding for schools that allow so-called illegal protests. At least 40 people are dead after hundreds of powerful storms tore through the southern and midwestern United States over the weekend. The storms knocked out power to hundreds of thousands of utility customers and triggered wildfires in Oklahoma. This comes after the Trump administration fired some 2,000 workers at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, including hundreds of forecasters at the National Weather Service. Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency is working to shutter NOAA offices, including a Hawaiian climate research station that since 1956 has measured steadily rising levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide. Chuck Schumer is facing mounting calls to step down as the Democrat Senate leader after he voted in favor of Republican spending package Friday, which has been described as a blank check for the White House to keep defunding and dismantling government services and agencies. Groups including Indivisible and Pass the Torch have joined the calls for Schumer to step aside. On Friday, 11 young activists with Sunrise Movement were arrested at Schumer's D.C. office as they urged him not to, quote, compromise on our lives and futures, unquote, ahead of the vote. The other Democratic senators who voted with Schumer and the Republicans were Catherine Cortez Masto, Dick Durbin, John Fetterman, Kirsten Gillibrand, Maggie Hassan, Gary Peters, Brian Schatz, Jeanne Shaheen, and Independent Senator Angus King. Calls have also been mounting for New York Congressmember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to challenge Schumer in his next primary election as she led the charge to oppose the GOP spending bill. She spoke on CNN Friday.
This turns the federal government into a slush fund for Donald Trump and Elon Musk. It sacrifices congressional authority, and it is deeply partisan. And so to me, it is almost unthinkable why Senate Democrats would vote to hand the few pieces of leverage that we have away for free when we've been sent here to protect Social Security, protect Medicaid, and protect Medicare.
President Trump signed an executive order Friday gutting smaller federal offices, including the Minority Business Development Agency, the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, and the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Also on Trump's chopping block, the U.S. Agency for Global Media, which funds the overseas broadcasters Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and Radio Free Asia. For the first time in over 8 decades, the Voice of America stopped broadcasting over the weekend after announcing it would fire nearly all of its 1,300 workers. Trump's cuts will also silence Radio and TV Marti, broadcasts into Cuba that have historically been used to attempt to overthrow the Cuban government. Separately, Trump signed an executive order Friday revoking Biden-era rules strengthening tribal sovereignty and self-determination for all 574 federally recognized tribes. President Trump addressed employees of the Department of Justice on Friday in a rambling, rare address riddled with lies and personal grievances. For over an hour, Trump assailed his opponents as scum, castigated federal judges as corrupt, and labeled news outlets that criticize his administration illegal.
I believe that CNN and MSDNC, who literally write 97.6% bad about me, are political arms of the Democrat Party. And in my opinion, they're really corrupt and they're illegal. What they do is illegal.
Trump also used his visit to the Great Hall of the Justice Department to heap praise on Aileen Cannon, the Trump-appointed U.S. District Judge in Florida who last year threw out a criminal case against Trump over his mishandling of classified documents. We'll have more on Trump's highly unusual speech at the Justice Department after headlines when we speak to Congressmember Jamie Raskin. In Serbia, hundreds of thousands of protesters flooded the streets of the capital Belgrade Saturday to demand justice for 15 people killed in the northern city of Novi Sad last November when a train station roof collapsed on them. The disaster triggered months of anti-government rallies calling on President Aleksandar Vučić to resign amidst accusations of widespread negligence and corruption. The student-led protests have swelled to include teachers, farmers, and workers.
We are waiting for authorities to be held accountable for what happened in Novi Sad, as we believe it is all about the irresponsibility of the state bodies.
Today we will demonstrate our dissent to show how many people will come out to show what we are striving for a normal state, a state of law, without corruption, lying, media pressures, persecutions, expulsions, unjust sentencing, etc.
Serbia's government denied reports from rights groups that police deployed a military-grade sonic weapon against protesters. Footage from Saturday's rally shows a sudden noise directed at protesters triggered panic and a brief stampede. And Vice President J.D. Vance was met with a chorus of boos as he attended a concert at the Kennedy Center Thursday evening. The audience loudly booed as Vance and his wife took their seats for a performance of the National Symphony Orchestra. President Trump, who last month dissolved the Kennedy Center's board of directors and named himself as chair, is expected to visit the renowned arts venue for a board meeting today. In related news, Shelley C. Lowe, the first Native American chair of the National Endowment of the Humanities, has stepped down from her post, quote, at the direction of President Trump, unquote. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.